You need to apologize to her right now. You are making a scene and embarrassing the hospital. My husband Terrence hissed these words into my ear, gripping my arm tight enough to bruise. Across the polished marble lobby, the 21-year-old intern who had just thrown a scalding hot vanilla latte all over my chest was smirking. She held her phone up, recording the entire thing, and announced to her live stream, "See guys, this is what happens when jealous older women try to ruin your vibe. My husband the CEO will handle her." I looked at Terrence, waiting for him to correct her, waiting for him to tell this child that I was not just some random woman, but the chief of neurosurgery and the owner of the building she was standing in. Instead, Terrence looked at me with cold, dead eyes and whispered, "Just say you are sorry, Vivian. Do not make me look bad in front of my new staff." That was the moment I realized my marriage was not just over, it was a war zone, and I had just been handed the ammunition to end it. Before I tell you how I destroyed his career and evicted his mistress from the city, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to remind a man that he was only the king because you were the queen who built the castle. My name is Dr. Vivian Brooks. At 42 years old, I have saved thousands of lives, built a medical empire from my late father's legacy, and maintained a reputation for being untouchable. But last Saturday, I was just a woman trying to sign some urgent paperwork on her day off. I had left my white coat in my office and was wearing vintage denim and a simple cashmere sweater. I walked into the lobby of St. Jude Medical Center, my mind focused on the board meeting scheduled for Monday. I did not notice the ring light or the tripod set up near the donor wall until I felt a hard shove against my shoulder. "Excuse me, watch where you are going." A shrill voice pierced the air. I stumbled back, my eyes landing on a young woman in a short, tight nursing scrub dress that was definitely against the dress code. She was holding a large iced coffee in one hand and adjusting her hair with the other. This was Kayla, the new intern Terrence had insisted we hire, despite her lack of qualifications. I straightened my sweater and said calmly, "Excuse me, you are blocking the main entrance for patients." Kayla rolled her eyes, looking at her phone screen, where comments were scrolling by. She laughed and said, "Nobody cares about patients right now. I am doing a day in the life of a CEO's wife vlog, and you just ruined my lighting move out of the frame. You look dusty." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. I stepped forward and said, "I beg your pardon, who do you think you are talking to?" Kayla scoffed, popping her gum. "I am talking to a nobody who clearly cannot afford to shop where I shop. My husband is Terrence Brooks, the CEO of this hospital, so unless you want to be banned from the premises, I suggest you get out of my face before I call security." The audacity took my breath away. I stood my ground and said, "Is that so? Well, I think Terrence would be very interested to know his wife is assaulting people in the lobby." Kayla's face twisted in anger. She stepped forward and swung her arm. The lid of her cup flew off and sticky hot liquid splashed across my neck, soaking into my cashmere sweater and dripping down my jeans. The heat was shocking, but the humiliation was worse. People in the lobby gasped. Security guards started to move toward us, but Kayla held up her hand and screamed, "Stay back, she attacked me. I am the victim here." I did not wipe the coffee off. I did not scream. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone and put it on speaker. I dialed Terrence's direct line. He answered on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "What is it, Vivian? I am in a meeting." I looked dead at Kayla and said into the phone, "You need to come down to the lobby immediately. Your new wife just threw coffee on me and is threatening to have me banned from my own hospital." There was a silence on the line, and then the sound of a chair scraping back. "I will be right there," he said. Kayla looked triumphant. She turned to the camera and said, "See guys, he is coming to defend my honor." When the elevator doors opened and Terrence stormed out, he looked impeccable in the Italian suit I had bought him. He saw me dripping with coffee, and for a second I saw panic in his eyes. But then he looked at Kayla, who immediately burst into fake tears, burying her face in her hands. "Baby, she pushed me," Kayla sobbed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She said I was too young to be in medicine and tried to break my ring light." Terrence looked at the security guards who were watching closely, and then he looked at the few patients who had their phones out. He grabbed my arm and pulled me roughly behind a large pillar away from the cameras. "What is wrong with you, Vivian?" He hissed, his face inches from mine. "Why are you harassing the interns?" I pulled my arm away, staring at him in disbelief. "Are you serious, Terrence? She is filming TikToks in the patient intake area, and she just assaulted me. I want her fired immediately." Terrence ran a hand over his face and sighed, shaking his head as if I were a petulant child. "Look, she is young, she is under a lot of pressure, and she brings a youthful energy to the hospital brand. You are just jealous because she is vibrant and you are uptight. We cannot fire her. It would look like a wrongful termination lawsuit waiting to happen. Just apologize to her for startling her and go change your clothes, you look like a mess." My blood ran cold. "Apologize?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You want the owner of St. Jude to apologize to an intern for getting assaulted?" Terrence narrowed his eyes. "I am the CEO, Vivian, and I am telling you to de-escalate this. Do it for the hospital. Do it for me. If you make a scene, everyone will say you are just an angry, bitter woman bullying a young girl. Is that the reputation you want?" He knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew how hard I worked to maintain a professional, composed image in a field dominated by white men who wanted to see me fail. I looked past him at Kayla, who had stopped crying and was winking at a passing male nurse. I realized then that this was not just about an intern. This was a power play. "Fine," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I will handle it." I walked back out from behind the pillar. Kayla smirked, expecting a groveling apology. I walked past her, leaning in close enough so only she and Terrence could hear. I whispered, "Enjoy your little vlog, Kayla. Make sure you get plenty of footage of the lobby because you won't be seeing it for much longer." I walked away toward the elevators, ignoring Terrence calling my name. I did not go to my office to change. I went straight to the server room to pull the security footage myself. The war had begun, and they had just fired the first shot. The next evening, I drove my Mercedes to the gated community where Terrence's brother, Marcus, and his wife Sarah lived. Sarah had invited us for a family dinner, claiming it was time to put work aside and bond. I knew Sarah tolerated me only because I had paid off her student loans and bought the villa she was living in, though the deed was technically in a trust controlled by Terrence. Sarah, a woman who prided herself on being a suburban socialite, had always made subtle digs about my career, implying that a woman's true place was supporting her husband, not outshining him. I arrived a few minutes late. When I walked into the dining room, the air was thick with laughter. Terrence was sitting at the head of the mahogany table holding a glass of wine, and sitting to his immediate right in the seat of honor, usually reserved for the spouse, was Kayla. I stopped in the doorway, my grip tightening on my clutch. Sarah looked up, her smile bright and entirely fake. "Oh, Vivian, you made it," she chirped, standing up but not moving to greet me. "We were just listening to Kayla's ideas for the hospital gala. She is so creative." I looked at the table setting. There were 6 chairs. Terrence, Kayla, Marcus, Sarah, and their teenage son were all seated comfortably. The only empty chair was a small folding wooden chair squeezed into the corner near the kitchen door, far away from the conversation. "Where am I sitting, Sarah?" I asked, keeping my tone polite. Sarah waved a hand dismissively toward the folding chair. "Oh, we figured you would be more comfortable there. You know how you like to check your emails and work during dinner? Plus, Kayla is the guest of honor tonight since she is leading the new outreach program, so she needs to be close to Terrence to discuss strategy." I looked at Kayla. She was wearing a sleeveless white dress that looked suspiciously like something a bride would wear to a rehearsal dinner. She took a sip of wine and giggled, resting her hand on Terrence's arm. "Yeah, Vivian, do not take it personally. Terrence says you are better at the back office stuff anyway. Leave the socializing to the people with personality." Terrence did not even look at me. He was busy cutting Kayla's steak for her. I felt a familiar burning sensation in my chest, but I forced it down. I walked over to the folding chair and sat down. The message was loud and clear. In this house, in this family, I was the bank account, and Kayla was the prize. So Vivian Sarah said, pouring herself more wine. When are you going to retire? I mean, you look tired. Kayla was just saying that the hospital needs a fresh face. You do not want to be the old guard holding back progress, do you? It is okay to step back and let the youth take over. We all know Terrence is the real brains behind the operation anyway. I picked up my fork, staring at Sarah. She was projecting her own insecurities onto me, using her privilege to make me feel small in a house I paid for. I was about to respond when the light from the chandelier caught something sparkling on Kayla's neck. I froze. I squinted, focusing on the necklace resting against Kayla's collarbone. It was a double strand of South Sea pearls with a distinctive diamond and sapphire clasp in the shape of a tear. My breath caught in my throat. That was not just any necklace. That was my mother's necklace. The one my father had given her on their 25th anniversary. The one I had reported missing from my safe deposit box 3 weeks ago. Terrence had told me I probably misplaced it, that I was getting forgetful in my old age. I looked at Terrence. He was laughing at something Kayla whispered. He had stolen my dead mother's jewelry to drape around the neck of his 21-year-old mistress, and then brought her to a family dinner to flaunt it in my face. Beautiful pearls, Kayla, I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. Where did you get them? Kayla touched the necklace, beaming. Oh, Terrence gave them to me. He said they belonged to an old aunt who passed away and nobody wanted them anymore. He said they deserved to be worn by someone with life and beauty, not locked away in a dark box. The room went silent. Sarah looked down at her plate, a small smirk playing on her lips. She knew. They all knew. I slowly placed my napkin on the table. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I simply smiled, a cold, terrifying smile that finally made Terrence look up and meet my eyes. That is a lovely story, I said, standing up. Enjoy your dinner. I have a phone call to make. I walked out of the dining room, leaving my untouched food behind. As I reached the foyer, I heard Kayla ask, "What is her problem?" And I heard Terrence reply, "Ignore her, she is just having a mood swing." I walked out to my car and sat in the silence of the night. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from rage. I pulled out my phone, but this time I did not call Terrence. I called my private investigator. "I want you to run a full forensic audit on Terrence's spending," I said, "and get me the number for the Grand Larceny Division of the NYPD. I have a theft to report." Monday mornings at St. Jude Medical Center were sacred. The boardroom on the 12th floor was a fortress of silence and serious decision-making, where the department heads gathered to discuss mortality rates, budget allocations, and complex surgical schedules. As the chief of neurosurgery and the majority shareholder, I sat at the head of the mahogany table listening to Dr. Evans, our head of cardiology, present his quarterly figures. The atmosphere was tense but professional, exactly how I liked it. The only disruption was the low hum of the air conditioning and the scratching of expensive fountain pens on paper. And then the double doors flew open with a bang that made half the room jump. I did not even have to look up to know who it was. The scent of overly sweet vanilla perfume wafted into the sterile room before she did. Kayla walked in not wearing the standard-issue blue scrubs of a surgical intern, but a custom-tailored pink set that was tight enough to be a second skin. She was holding a venti iced coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, thumb scrolling rapidly across the screen. "Sorry I am late, guys," she announced, her voice echoing uncomfortably in the silent room. The line at the cafe was insane, and then I could not find a parking spot, so I just parked in that spot marked for the chief of surgery. "That is okay, right?" Terrence said. "I could use whatever spot I wanted." A collective gasp went around the table. Dr. Evans took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I slowly placed my pen down, feeling the blood pound in my temples. That was my parking spot, the one my father had used for 30 years. Kayla pulled out a chair, not just any chair, but the one directly to the right of the CEO's seat, and flopped down, crossing her legs. She looked around the table of distinguished surgeons, most of whom had been practicing medicine since before she was born, and flashed a bright, vacuous smile. So what are we talking about? Is it boring stuff or fun stuff? I looked at Terrence. He was sitting at the other end of the table looking unbothered. In fact, he looked amused. He leaned back in his leather chair, tapping his fingers on the armrest. Kayla. I said, my voice low and controlled. This is an executive board meeting for department heads. You are a first-year intern. You are supposed to be on rounds in the ICU right now. You are not authorized to be in this room. Kayla rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Ugh, here we go again with the rules. Terrence, tell her. I told you I have ideas for the hospital. I have vision. You said I could sit in. Terrence cleared his throat. The room went deathly quiet. Everyone looked from me to him, waiting for the CEO to enforce the protocol. Waiting for him to tell this child to leave so the adults could work. Let her stay. Vivian, Terrence said, his voice casual, as if he were ordering lunch. Kayla represents the next generation. We need fresh perspectives. Go ahead, Kayla. What did you want to bring up? I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was a violation of every hospital bylaw, but I knew if I argued now, I would look like the aggressor. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Fine. Let us hear it. Kayla took a loud sip of her drink, the ice rattling obnoxiously. Okay, so I looked at my schedule for this month, and it is honestly tragic. You guys have me working like 60 hours a week. That is not going to work for my brand. I need my weekends off, and I definitely cannot do those overnight shifts anymore. They are bad for my skin, and the lighting in the trauma ward is terrible for selfies. Dr. Evans choked on his water. I stared at her, genuinely unable to comprehend the level of delusion. You are in a surgical residency program, Kayla. The state board requires 80 hours a week. You do not get to choose your hours based on your skincare routine. Kayla waved a hand at me dismissively. That is just like a guideline. Terrence said we can work around it. Anyway, the main thing is this Friday. I need the schedule changed because Terrence is taking me to that new spa in the Hamptons for a couples massage and detox weekend. So I need someone else to cover my trauma shift. The silence that followed was deafening. She had just admitted in front of the entire executive board that the CEO was taking an intern on a romantic getaway, while he was still legally married to the chief of surgery. The disrespect was so palpable it felt like a physical slap to the face. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. That is enough, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. This is not a social club. This is a hospital. We save lives here. We do not rearrange trauma schedules so you can get a massage. Get out of this room, go to the ICU, and report to your attending physician. If you leave your post again, I will have you written up for abandonment of duty. Kayla's face crumbled. She looked at Terrence, her bottom lip trembling. See, I told you she bullies me. I told you she is just jealous because you are taking me to the Hamptons and leaving her at home with her cats. Terrence slammed his hand down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Sit down, Vivian, he roared. I froze. I looked at my husband, the man I had put through business school, the man I had handed this position to. His face was twisted in a snarl I barely recognized. Do not speak to her like that, Terrence spat, standing up to tower over the table. You are so petty. This is exactly why the hospital morale is down. You are an old, bitter woman who cannot stand seeing someone young and full of life. You are letting your personal jealousy interfere with professional development. My personal jealousy, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. She is an intern demanding a vacation in the middle of a residency. That is not jealousy, Terrence. That is standards, something you clearly lack. Don't you dare talk to me about standards, Terrence yelled, pointing a finger at me. I am the CEO. I run this place. And if I say she needs a break, she gets a break. In fact, since you are so concerned about her reporting to an attending, let us fix that right now. He grabbed a notepad from the center of the table and pulled a gold pen from his pocket. He scribbled something furiously, the sound of the pen tearing into the paper filling the silent room. Effective immediately, Terrence announced, his eyes locking with mine, daring me to challenge him. Kayla is no longer under the supervision of the surgical department. She is promoted. Promoted to what? Dr. Evans asked, his voice trembling slightly. She has not even finished her first month. Terrence ripped the page off the notepad and slid it across the long table toward Kayla. She picked it up, reading it with a growing grin. She is now the special executive assistant to the CEO, Terrence declared, straightening his tie. She answers only to me. She makes her own hours, and she has the authority to oversee departmental scheduling to ensure work-life balance. Kayla squealed, clapping her hands. Oh my God, thank you, baby. I mean, thank you, Mr. Brooks. She looked at me, holding the piece of paper like a weapon. Did you hear that, Vivian? I am an executive now. So about that schedule change, I will just approve it myself. I looked around the room. My colleagues, people I had known for 20 years, looked down at their laps. They were terrified. They saw the madness in Terrence's eyes and knew that speaking up meant losing their pensions. I slowly sat back down. The humiliation burned in my throat like bile. My husband had just made his mistress my boss in administrative matters. He had desecrated the profession my father built. But as I looked at Kayla, who was now taking a selfie with her handwritten promotion letter, and Terrence, who was preening like a peacock, a strange calm washed over me. They thought this was a victory. They thought they had broken me. I picked up my pen again. I did not look at Terrence. I looked at the legal pad in front of me. Understood, I said, my voice completely flat. Congratulations on the promotion, Kayla. Terrence looked disappointed. He wanted a fight. He wanted tears. He wanted me to scream so he could call security and label me hysterical, but I gave him nothing. Good, Terrence huffed, sitting back down. Glad we are all on the same page. Now let us discuss the budget for the new executive wing renovation. Kayla has some ideas for the decor. As Kayla started rambling about importing pink marble from Italy, I quietly wrote 3 words on my notepad. Moral, turpitude, clause. Terrence had just violated the morality clause of his employment contract in front of 12 witnesses. He thought he was king of the world, but he had just handed me the keys to his execution. I let them talk. I let them laugh. Because I knew something they didn't. The recording app on my phone, which I had placed face down on the table when I walked in, had captured every single word. The vibration of the phone in my pocket felt like a premonition. It was Saturday night, and my estate in the hills was lit up like a carnival. It was Terrence's 45th birthday, and despite the tension, despite the mistress he had promoted to executive assistant, and despite the fact that we were sleeping in separate bedrooms, he had insisted on throwing a massive party. He said it was for networking, but I knew the truth. Terrence needed an audience. He needed people to look at him, to envy him, and to applaud a success that was entirely funded by my bank account. I was standing on the balcony overlooking the pool, swirling a glass of sparkling water. Down below, catered waiters were passing around trays of caviar and truffle sliders. The DJ was blasting hip-hop, and the air smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. I watched as Terrence held court by the pool house, surrounded by his sycophants. And of course, Kayla was right there. She was wearing a dress that was barely legal, clinging to his arm, laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Then my phone buzzed against my hip. I pulled it out, expecting a message from the hospital, or maybe a colleague wishing Terrence a happy birthday. Instead, it was a fraud alert from American Express. Transaction alert, $150,000, Portia of Beverly Hills. Please confirm if this was you. I stared at the screen. The numbers swam before my eyes. $150,000. On a joint card, a card that I paid off every month. A card that was supposed to be for emergencies and household expenses, not for luxury German engineering. My blood ran cold, then hot. I looked down at the driveway. The massive iron gates were opening. A flatbed truck was backing in carrying a sleek, jet-black Porsche 911 GT3 wrapped in a giant red bow. The crowd at the party gasped. People started cheering. Terrence threw his hands up in the air like he had just won the Super Bowl. I walked down the stairs. My heels clicked against the marble, a rhythmic countdown to a detonation. I moved through the crowd, ignoring the guests who tried to stop me to say hello. I walked straight out the front door and onto the driveway just as the car was being lowered onto the pavement. Terrence was already there, circling the car, running his hands over the hood like it was a woman's body. Kayla was jumping up and down, squealing. "Oh my God, Terrence," she screamed. "It is beautiful. It matches my nails." I stopped 10 feet away from them. The music from the house seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the pounding of my own heart. "Terrence," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the air. He looked up, grinning. His eyes were glassy with champagne and adrenaline. "Vivian, look at this beauty. A little birthday treat for the CEO, right? You know what they say. Work hard, play hard." I held up my phone. "You spent $150,000 on a car, without discussing it with me. On our joint card." Terrence's smile faltered, but only for a second. He waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, relax, Vivian. Do not be such a buzzkill. It is a business expense. I need to look the part. The CEO of St. Jude cannot be driving around in that old sedan. It affects the brand image." I stepped closer. "A business expense. Really? Then why is Kayla holding the keys?" Kayla snatched the keys from the delivery driver and dangled them in front of my face. "Because she said popping her gum." Terrence said since he is so busy running the hospital, I will need to drive him around a lot. So technically it is for both of us. Plus, he put the registration in my name for insurance reasons. Something about liability. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. He bought a car with my money and titled it to his mistress. In my driveway. In front of our friends. "You put the car in her name?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "Terrence, that is marital asset fraud. That is theft." "Oh, stop it!" Sarah's voice rang out from behind me. I turned around. Sarah. My sister-in-law was standing there with her husband Marcus. She was holding a martini and looking at me with pure disgust. "God, Vivian, why do you always have to ruin everything?" Sarah spat. "It is his birthday. Can you not let the man have one moment of joy without making it about money? You are so obsessed with your bank account." I looked at her stunned. "I am obsessed." "Sarah, he just stole 6 figures from me." "He did not steal it," Marcus chimed in, stepping forward to defend his brother. "He earned it. He puts up with you, doesn't he? That is hard work right there. Besides, you have millions sitting in that trust fund from your daddy. What are you saving it for? You do not have kids. You are not taking it to the grave, Vivian." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not taking it to the grave. They were weaponizing my childlessness against me. They were telling me that because I had no heir, my money belonged to them. To Terrence, to his mistress, to this family of leeches. "You people are unbelievable," I whispered. "Oh, grow up!" Terrence laughed, opening the driver's side door. "Do not be so stingy, Vivian. It is ugly. You know that is why I prefer Kayla. She knows how to enjoy life. You just know how to hoard. Now move out of the way. We are going for a test drive." Kayla hopped into the passenger seat, sticking her tongue out at me as the window rolled down. "Bye, Karen," she yelled. "Try not to wait up." The engine roared to life, a guttural growl that shook the pavement. Terrence revved it once, twice, drowning out any response I could have made. He peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching, leaving skid marks on the stone pavers I had imported from Italy. Sarah and Marcus laughed, clinking their glasses. "See," Sarah said to me, shaking her head. "If you were a better wife, maybe he would buy you a Porsche. But you are just cold." She turned her back on me and walked back into the party, back to eating my food and drinking my wine. I stood there in the exhaust fumes, alone in the driveway of the home I had built. The humiliation was total. They thought they had won. They thought that by shaming me, calling me cheap, and mocking my life, they could silence me. They thought I would go upstairs and cry. But the tears did not come. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me, sharp and dangerous. I realized then that arguing with parasites was useless. You do not negotiate with a tapeworm, you remove it. I slowly turned around. I did not go back to the party. I walked around the side of the house into the quiet darkness of the garden. I pulled my phone out again. The fraud alert was still on the screen. I swiped it away and opened my contacts. I scrolled past the hospital administrators, past the lawyers, and stopped at a number I had saved years ago but never used. A number given to me by a patient who worked in federal intelligence. It rang twice. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. "This is Dr. Brooks." "Dr. Brooks," the voice said, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, looking up at the moon. "I need to hire you. I need a full investigation. Financial criminal surveillance. Everything." "Who is the target?" he asked. I watched the lights of the party flickering in the distance. "My husband, Terrence Brooks," I said, "and a woman named Kayla Jenkins. And while you are at it, look into my sister-in-law, Sarah Brooks. I want to know where every single penny has gone for the last 5 years. I hear you," Doc Vance said. "When do you want me to start?" I looked at the skid marks on the driveway. "Start now," I said. "And Vance, I want enough evidence to bury them." I hung up the phone. The night air was cool, but for the first time in months I did not feel the chill. I felt the heat of the fire that was about to burn their entire world to the ground. "Happy birthday, Terrence. Enjoy the car. It is going to be the most expensive ride of your life." The emergency room at St. Jude Medical Center was usually a symphony of controlled chaos. As the chief of neurosurgery, I did not typically work the floor during the Tuesday night shift, but we were short-staffed, and unlike my husband who sat in a plush office upstairs, I believed in leading from the front lines. I was at the central nursing station reviewing digital charts when I heard the distinct high-pitched giggle that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Kayla walked through the double doors of the trauma unit like she was walking a red carpet. She was wearing her pink scrubs, which were tighter than ever, and she had a sleek new iPhone mounted on a gimbal stabilizer in her hand. Behind her were 2 other young girls, clearly friends from outside the hospital, looking around with wide, excited eyes. I stood up, my pulse quickening. This was a sterile, restricted area. We had a city councilman, Mr. Henderson, in Trauma Bay too. He had been brought in with a severe head injury from a car accident and was currently sedated and intubated, waiting for a transport team to take him to imaging. I started walking toward them, ready to throw them out, when I saw Kayla gesture to her friends. "Okay, guys," she whispered loudly to her phone. "This is where the magic happens. I am going to show you the VIP patient I am treating. Terrence says I am basically the lead doctor on this case." She pushed open the curtain to Trauma Bay 2. I broke into a run. "Kayla, get out of there," I shouted, but the noise of the ER drowned me out. I reached the curtain just in time to see a nightmare unfold in slow motion. Kayla was standing next to Mr. Henderson's bed. The councilman was unconscious, a breathing tube taped to his mouth connected to a ventilator that was rhythmically pumping oxygen into his lungs. Kayla wrinkled her nose, looking at the screen of her phone. "The tape is ruining the aesthetic. It covers half his face. I cannot get a good selfie with him if he looks like a mummy. Hold on, let me just adjust it so the followers can see who it is." "No, do not touch it!" I screamed, lunging forward. But I was too late. Kayla reached out with her manicured acrylic nails and yanked on the endotracheal tube. Because she had no medical training, she did not just peel back the tape. She pulled the entire tube out of his airway. The reaction was instant. The ventilator alarm screamed a piercing high-low sound that signaled a disconnect. Mr. Henderson's chest stopped rising. The cardiac monitor turned from green to flashing red as his oxygen saturation levels plummeted. "Oh my God," Kayla shrieked, jumping back as the tube hissed and flopped onto the bedsheets. He is making a weird noise. Why is he turning blue? Code blue in trauma. 2. I yelled, slamming the code button on the wall. I grabbed the ambu bag from the wall mount and shoved Kayla aside so hard she stumbled into the crash cart. Get out of my way. Medical staff swarmed the room. Nurse Brenda, the head of the ER nursing staff, rushed in with the intubation kit. I moved on pure instinct, tilting the patient's head back, sealing the mask over his face, and squeezing the bag to force air into his starving lungs. Sats are dropping! Dr. Brooks! Brenda yelled, her eyes terrified. Down to 80, 75. He is entering hypoxic arrest. I need suction and a size 8 tube now, I commanded. My hands were steady, but my mind was screaming with rage. I looked up for a split second. Kayla was standing in the corner, still holding her phone. She was not helping. She was checking her hair in the reflection of the glass cabinet. Security, remove her, I roared. 2 guards grabbed Kayla and her friends, dragging them out of the room as she kicked and screamed, Do you know who I am? My boyfriend owns this hospital, let me go! It took me 3 agonizing minutes to re-intubate the councilman and stabilize his heart rate. When his vitals finally leveled out, I slumped against the wall, sweat dripping down my back. We had almost killed a city official because an intern wanted a photo for Instagram. 10 minutes later, I stormed into the CEO's office on the top floor. I did not knock. I threw the door open so hard it hit the wall with a crack. Terrence was sitting behind his massive oak desk, sipping scotch. Kayla was already there, curled up on the leather sofa, sobbing into a tissue. I pointed a shaking finger at Kayla. You are done. I am calling the medical board. I am calling the police. You just committed assault and battery on a patient. You nearly killed him. Vivian. Calm down, Terrence said, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. You are being dramatic. Dramatic. I laughed, a sound that held no humor. She extubated a patient, Terrence. She pulled life support out of a man's throat to take a selfie. Kayla wailed louder. I was trying to help him. The tube looked uncomfortable. I was just trying to adjust it and it fell out. Vivian is lying. She pushed me. Terrence walked around the desk and stood between me and Kayla. He looked at me with cold, calculating eyes. Nobody is calling the police, Vivian. Think about the liability. If word gets out that an untrained staff member nearly killed Councilman Henderson, the lawsuits will bankrupt us. This stays in-house. It stays in-house, I repeated. She needs to be fired and arrested. That is how you handle it. No, Terrence said smoothly. That admits guilt. We need a different narrative. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Send Nurse Brenda in. Nurse Brenda walked in a moment later. She was a woman in her 60s, a widow who had worked at St. Jude for 30 years. She looked terrified, twisting her hands in her scrub top. Brenda, Terrence said, his voice dropping to a smooth, predatory purr. We have a problem. There was an incident in the ER tonight. A lapse in supervision. Brenda looked at me, then at Terrence. Yes, sir. The intern. Miss Kayla. She pulled the tube. No, Brenda, Terrence interrupted, stepping closer to her. That is not what happened. You see, if an intern makes a mistake, it is because her supervising nurse failed to monitor her. And if the chief of surgery failed to secure the trauma bay, then it is a systemic failure. I stepped forward. Do not you dare, Terrence. Do not you dare put this on Brenda. She was triaging a heart attack victim in the next bay. Terrence ignored me. He stared down at Brenda. Brenda, you are 2 years away from full retirement benefits, correct? You have a sick husband at home who relies on our health insurance. Brenda nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Yes, Mr. Brooks. Here is what is going to happen, Terrence said, sliding a typed document across the desk. You are going to sign this incident report. It states that you asked Kayla to adjust the tube, and you and Dr. Brooks turned your backs, allowing the accident to happen. It was a miscommunication between senior staff. Kayla was acting under orders. That is a lie, I shouted. I will not let her sign that. Terrence looked at Brenda. If you do not sign it, Brenda, I will fire you for gross negligence effective immediately. You will lose your pension. You will lose your health insurance. And I will make sure you never work in this city again. Brenda looked at me. Her eyes were begging for forgiveness. I knew about her husband's chemotherapy bills. I knew she had no choice. "I am so sorry, Dr. Brooks," she whispered. She picked up the pen with a trembling hand and signed the paper. "Good," Terrence smiled, snatching the paper back. "Now get out, and take the rest of the week off, unpaid." Brenda ran out of the room. Kayla stopped crying instantly, hopping off the couch to wrap her arms around Terrence's neck. "Thank you, baby. You are such a boss. She is just a hater." I stood there feeling a coldness spread through my chest that was deeper than anger. It was hatred. Pure, crystallized hatred. He had not just humiliated me, he had corrupted my staff and endangered patients to protect his ego and his mistress. "Get out of my office," Vivian Terrence said, sitting back down and pouring another drink. "And try to do a better job supervising your department next time." I stared at him for a long moment. I realized then that shouting would not work. The law would not work, not when he controlled the paperwork. I needed something else. I needed his own voice. I turned to leave. As I reached the door, I pretended to stumble, dropping my heavy leather planner on the floor. "Whoops!" Clumsy Kayla laughed. I knelt down to pick it up. As I gathered my papers, my hand slipped under the edge of the heavy oak guest chair that faced Terrence's desk. In one fluid motion, I pulled a small black device from my pocket, a high-fidelity voice recorder I had bought from the private investigator, and stuck it to the underside of the chair frame with double-sided tape. I stood up, clutching my planner to my chest. "You win, Terrence," I said softly. "I will be more careful." I walked out of the office and closed the door. I leaned against the wall in the hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs. I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to the recorder. The audio waves started dancing across my screen in real time. I put my headphones in. I heard the clink of glasses. I heard Kayla giggle. And then I heard Terrence say, "Clearly, do not worry, babe. We will doctor the security footage tonight. As long as Brenda keeps her mouth shut, we are untouchable. Besides, once I force Vivian to sell her shares, I will buy you that penthouse." I pressed the record button on my app. I had them. The war had moved from the battlefield to the shadows, and they had no idea I was listening to every breath they took. The funeral of Dr. Elias Vance was the largest gathering the city of Chicago had seen in a decade. My father was not just a surgeon. He was a pioneer, a philanthropist, and the founder of the medical empire I now helped run. The cathedral was packed with weeping nurses, somber politicians, and former patients who owed their lives to his steady hands. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money. I stood in the front row wearing a black veil and the simple pearl earrings he had given me for my medical school graduation. I felt a hollow ache in my chest that was so deep it made it hard to breathe. But as I looked to my right, the ache turned into a burning rage. The seat next to me was empty. My husband, the CEO of my father's hospital, was not there. Terrence had sent a generic flower arrangement with a card that read, "Deepest condolences, unable to return from urgent business trip." The audacity was breathtaking. He had not even bothered to call me. As the choir began to sing a mournful hymn, I heard the click of heels on the stone floor. It was a sharp, staccato rhythm that was too fast and too loud for a funeral. I did not turn around, but a ripple of whispers moved through the congregation behind me. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," a voice hissed from the pew behind me. I turned my head slightly. Walking down the center aisle was Sarah, my sister-in-law. In a sea of black and navy mourning attire, Sarah was a shock to the system. She was wearing a dress the color of fresh arterial blood. It was tight, low-cut, and completely inappropriate for a nightclub, let alone a funeral. She had paired it with oversized sunglasses and a smirk that suggested she was walking a runway. She squeezed into the pew next to me, filling the space where Terrence should have been. The scent of her cloying floral perfume instantly overpowered the smell of the lilies. "Sorry I am late," Sarah whispered loudly enough for the mayor to hear 2 rows back. Traffic was a nightmare. And honestly, finding a dress that screams celebration of life is harder than you think. I looked at her, my eyes cold behind my veil. You are wearing red, Sarah. This is a funeral. Sarah adjusted her sunglasses, not taking them off. Oh, Vivian, stop being so morbid. Your father lived a long life. Besides, black washes me out. You should try adding some color to your life. Maybe then your husband would not be so bored. I clenched my hands in my lap until my knuckles turned white. Where is he, Sarah? Where is Terrence? Sarah pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times and then shoved it under my nose. Look at this view, she said, her voice dripping with fake envy. He just posted this on Facebook 5 minutes ago. I looked at the screen. It was a photo of 2 pairs of legs stretched out on a white sandy beach. The water in the background was a brilliant turquoise. Between the legs sat a bucket of champagne and a plate of oysters. The caption read, "Finding peace in the chaos. Mexico vibes." Tagged at the resort at Pedregal Cabo San Lucas. And then I saw it. In the corner of the photo, reflected in the sweating silver ice bucket, was the distorted but unmistakable face of Kayla. She was wearing a neon bikini and blowing a kiss to the camera. He is in Cabo, I whispered, my voice trembling. He missed my father's funeral to go to Cabo with his mistress. Sarah snatched the phone back and slipped it into her clutch. Well, he has been under a lot of stress lately, Vivian. Dealing with you and your father's declining health took a toll on him. He needed a release. Kayla is good for him. She helps him relax. You just make him tense. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. Get out, I said. Get out of this church. Sarah laughed softly. I am not going anywhere. I am family, remember? And besides, I have a message for you. She leaned in close, her lips brushing against my ear. The choir reached a crescendo, masking her words from everyone else, but I heard them clearly. The old man is dead, Vivian. That means the protection is gone. Terrence is the king now. He runs the board, he runs the money, and he is tired of waiting for you to die. So do yourself a favor. When the lawyers come calling next week, just sign the transfer papers, give him the controlling shares. If you do, maybe he will let you keep the house. If you fight him, he will leave you with nothing but that black dress. She pulled back, patting my hand with a mock gesture of comfort. Think about it, sweetie. It is over. You lost. I stared at the altar where my father's casket lay, draped in white flowers. I felt a wave of nausea. They had planned this. They waited for my father to die so they could strike. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just a daddy's girl who would crumble without her protector. The service ended in a blur. I walked out of the cathedral into the blinding afternoon sun, feeling completely alone. The crowd began to disperse, people murmuring their condolences, but I could not hear them. All I could hear was Sarah's voice saying, "Terrence is the king now. Dr. Brooks." A deep, gravelly voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up. Standing by the black hearse was Mr. Henderson. He had been my father's personal attorney and best friend for 40 years. He was a man of few words with eyes that had seen everything and forgotten nothing. He was holding a thick, sealed manila envelope. "Mr. Henderson," I said, wiping my eyes, "thank you for coming." He did not smile. He looked around the parking lot, scanning the faces of the crowd. He saw Sarah standing by her car, lighting a cigarette and laughing with Marcus. He saw the empty space where Terrence should have been. "He is not here, is he?" Mr. Henderson asked. "No," I said. "He is in Cabo." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had long suspected. He stepped closer to me, blocking Sarah's view with his broad shoulders. "Your father was a brilliant surgeon, Vivian," Mr. Henderson said softly. "But he was an even better judge of character. He knew Terrence was a snake the day you married him. But he also knew you loved him, so he let you make your own mistakes." I looked down at the ground. I know. I should have listened. Mr. Henderson placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Your father spent the last 6 months of his life doing 2 things, fighting cancer and preparing for this exact moment. He knew that once he was gone, Terrence would make his move. He knew they would come for the shares. He handed me the envelope. It was heavy, sealed with red wax. "What is this?" I asked. Mr. Henderson lowered his voice. "This is the dead man's switch. Your father liquidated his personal assets into a blind trust 3 days before he died. He also triggered a dormant clause in the hospital's bylaws. It is called the founder's veto." I stared at him. The founder's veto? I thought that was a myth. "It is real," Mr. Henderson said. "And it gives the direct blood heir absolute power to dissolve the current board of directors in the event of ethical misconduct. But there is more. Inside that envelope is a file your father hired private investigators to compile over the last year. He tracked every penny Terrence stole. He tracked the Mistress. He tracked the kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies." My mouth fell open. "Dad knew. He knew everything. He wanted to protect you," Mr. Henderson said. "He told me to give this to you only when you were ready to stop being a wife and start being a CEO. So, Vivian, look at me. Are you ready?" I looked over at Sarah, who was checking her reflection in the side mirror of her car. I thought about Terrence and Cabo laughing at my grief. I thought about Kayla destroying my hospital. I took the envelope. My hand stopped shaking. I felt the spirit of my father settle over me, not as a weight, but as armor. "I am ready," I said. "Good," Mr. Henderson said, finally cracking a small, grim smile. "Because there is one more thing. Your father changed his will regarding the hospital land. The building Terrence thinks he runs. He does not own the ground it sits on. You do, and the lease expires at midnight tonight." I clutched the envelope to my chest. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan so cold and so absolute that it terrified even me. "Take me to the office, Mr. Henderson," I said, walking toward the limousine. "I have an eviction notice to write." The Oakwood Country Club was the kind of place where old money went to hide from the rest of the world. It was a fortress of manicured hedges, white marble fountains, and social exclusion founded by my grandfather 70 years ago. The membership fee alone cost more than most people's houses, and the waiting list was a decade long. To the outside world, it was a symbol of prestige. To me, it was just the place where I learned to swim, and where my father taught me how to play chess on the terrace. It was 3 days after my father's funeral. I was exhausted, my eyes were swollen, and I was wearing a simple black linen dress. I had come to the club for one reason only. I needed silence. I needed to sit in the Founder's Garden, a private enclave named after my family, and read through the terrifying documents Mr. Henderson had given me. But as I walked up the limestone steps toward the main entrance, I realized silence was the last thing I was going to get. Blocking the grand double doors was a cluster of women in pastel sundresses and oversized hats. At the center of them, holding court like Marie Antoinette, were Sarah and Kayla. Sarah was wearing a white lace dress that looked ridiculous for a Tuesday afternoon, and Kayla was draped in Chanel from head to toe. They were laughing loudly, holding champagne flutes, surrounded by the wives of the hospital board members. I kept my head down, clutching my leather portfolio, intending to walk past them. I did not have the energy for a confrontation. I just wanted to get to the garden. "Excuse me," a heavy hand landed on my shoulder. I stopped and looked up. A security guard I did not recognize, a young man with a thick neck and an earpiece, was blocking my path. "I am sorry, ma'am," the guard said, looking me up and down with a sneer. "Deliveries are around the back." I blinked, confused. "I beg your pardon." "Deliveries," he repeated slower this time, as if I did not understand English. "Or if you are part of the cleaning crew, the service entrance is by the kitchen. The front door is for members only." I felt the blood rush to my face. "I am a member. I am Dr. Vivian Brooks. My father founded this club." Before the guard could respond, a high-pitched laugh cut through the air. "Oh, Kevin, do not listen to her. She is delusional." Kayla strutted over the heels of her shoes, clicking on the stone. She took a sip of her champagne and looked at me with pity. "This is the woman I told you about," Kayla said to the guard, loud enough for the entire group of women to hear. "She used to be married to the CEO, my boyfriend." But she is having a hard time letting go. She has been stalking us. Honestly, it is sad. Sarah stepped up beside her, shaking her head. It is true. Poor thing. Vivian, honey, this is a private tea party for the inner circle, the wives of St. Jude. You are not a wife anymore, technically. And looking at that dress, you definitely do not fit the dress code. You look like the help. The women behind them giggled. I looked at the faces of women I had known for years, women who had attended my wedding, women whose children I had treated. They all looked away, sipping their drinks, choosing the winning side. Please escort her off the property, Kevin Sarah said, waving her hand. We cannot have her depressing the vibe. We are celebrating Terrence's new era. The guard stepped forward, reaching for my arm. Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to leave, or I will call the police for trespassing. I looked at the guard. I looked at Sarah's smug face. I looked at Kayla's triumphant grin. I did not scream. I did not pull out my membership card. I did not say, "Do you know who I am?" Because that is what insecure people do. I stepped back, smoothing down my dress. Very well, I said softly. Enjoy your tea, ladies. I turned around and walked back down the stairs. I heard them burst into laughter behind me. Oh my God, did you see her face? Kayla shrieked. She is totally broken. I walked around the corner of the building out of their sight. But I did not go to the parking lot. I walked along the side of the clubhouse through the rose bushes until I reached a heavy, nondescript steel door almost hidden by ivy. This was not the service entrance. This was the founder's entrance. I reached into my bag and pulled out a heavy black titanium keycard. It was the master key my father had given me when I turned 18. I pressed it against the scanner. There was a soft beep and the lock clicked open. I slipped inside. The air conditioning hit me instantly. I was in the private corridor that ran behind the walls of the main club, a series of passages designed for the owners to move unseen. I walked silently down the hallway until I reached the owner's suite. The suite was a private room with a balcony that overlooked the main terrace. It was screened by thick one-way glass and heavy trellis vines. You could sit there and see everything happening on the patio below, but no one could see you. I walked onto the balcony and sat down in the wicker chair. I was directly above them, not 10 feet away. I could smell Sarah's perfume. I could see the bubbles in their champagne. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. I placed it on the railing hidden by the ivy. They had no idea I was there. They thought I was crying in my car. So when do we make the move? I heard Sarah ask. Her voice was low now, the performance over. Kayla sighed, the sound of ice rattling in her glass. Terrence says tonight. He is finalizing the wire transfer at midnight. Are you sure it is safe? Sarah asked. That is $5 million, Kayla. If the IRS flags it, Kayla laughed. Don't be a coward, Sarah. Terrence has it all figured out. He set up a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Blue Horizon Medical Supply. On paper, the hospital is paying them for new MRI machines. But the company is fake. The money goes straight into an offshore account that only Terrence and I can access. I froze. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. They were not just spending my money. They were embezzling hospital funds. $5 million meant for patient care laundered through a fake vendor. And what about Vivian? Sarah asked. Will she notice? Kayla snorted. Please. She is too busy crying over her dead daddy to look at the ledgers. Besides, Terrence forged her signature on the authorization forms yesterday. He practiced it for hours. If anyone asks, the audit trail leads straight back to her. She will be the one going to prison, not us. My blood turned to ice. They were framing me. They were going to steal $5 million and set me up to take the fall for it. Yeah, Sarah said, sounding relieved. That is brilliant. Terrence really is a genius. Once the money is in the Caymans, we can finally get rid of her for good. We will buy that villa in Tuscany you wanted. I will look so good in Italy, Kayla mused. I am going to be the most stylish fugitive ever. They clinked their glasses. To the Cayman Islands, they chorused. I sat there in the shadows, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. I looked at my phone. The recording was running, every word, every conspiracy, every confession. I stopped the recording and uploaded it immediately to the encrypted cloud server Mr. Henderson had set up. I looked down at them one last time. They looked so happy. They looked so secure in their cruelty. "Enjoy the champagne," I whispered into the empty air, "because it is the last drink you will ever have as free women." I stood up and walked back into the shadows of the hallway. I did not leave the club. I went straight to the private office in the back of the suite where there was a secure landline. I dialed a number I had memorized from the file Mr. Henderson gave me. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, White Collar Crimes Division," a voice answered. "This is Dr. Vivian Brooks." I said, my voice steady as stone. "I have a priority. One tip regarding an active wire fraud in progress. The transfer is happening at midnight, and I have the confession on tape." I hung up the phone. I checked my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. They had 8 hours left, and I was going to let them enjoy every single minute of it right up until the clock struck 12. The following Wednesday afternoon, the atmosphere in my executive suite was shattered by the sound of weeping. It was not the quiet, dignified grief of a family member receiving bad news about a patient. It was the loud, jagged, hysterical sobbing of a woman who had realized she had dug her own grave. My assistant buzzed me. "Dr. Brooks, your sister-in-law is here. She says it is a life-or-death emergency. She is on the floor. Send her in," I said, signing the last of the discharge papers on my desk. Sarah practically crawled into my office. The woman who had mocked my dress at the country club just 24 hours ago was gone. In her place was a trembling mess. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivers, her hair was disheveled, and she was clutching a designer handbag that I knew cost more than a nurse's monthly salary. "Vivian, please," Sarah gasped, throwing herself into the chair opposite my desk. "You have to help me. They are going to hurt me. They are going to hurt Marcus." I placed my pen down slowly. "Who is going to hurt you, Sarah?" Sarah took a shaking breath. "These men, investors. I borrowed some money. Short term. It was supposed to be a sure thing. Kayla told me about this new cryptocurrency launch. She said Terrence put money in it and doubled it in a week. She said I was stupid if I did not get in on the ground floor. So I borrowed $50,000 from a private lender because Marcus would not let me touch our savings." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Let me get this straight. You took financial advice from a 21-year-old intern who thinks the Cayman Islands is a brand of salad dressing, and you borrowed money from loan sharks to fund it." Sarah nodded frantically. "The coin crashed this morning, Vivian. It is worth 0. It was a rug pull, and the men, they called me an hour ago. They said if I do not have the 50,000 plus 20,000 in interest by Saturday night, they are coming for the house. They said they will break Marcus's legs." She reached across the desk, grabbing my hand with her clammy fingers. "Vivian, you have millions. 50,000 is nothing to you. Please, just write me a check. I will pay you back. I swear. We are family. You cannot let them hurt us." I looked at her hand on mine. I remembered her standing in the country club driveway laughing as the security guard tried to throw me out. I remembered her wearing red to my father's funeral. I remembered her telling me to sign over my shares. I pulled my hand away as if I had been burned. "I am not a bank, Sarah," I said coldly. "And I am certainly not an ATM for people who despise me. You and Kayla are so close. Ask her for the money, or ask Terrence. He is the CEO, isn't he?" Sarah wailed. "I cannot tell Terrence. He will kill me. And Kayla is not answering my texts. Vivian, please. Be the bigger person. Do not be so heartless." "Heartless," I repeated, standing up. "You called me a bitter, barren woman in front of my entire staff. You helped my husband humiliate me. You plotted to steal my inheritance. And now you want my help. Get out of my office, Sarah. Figure it out yourself." Sarah's face changed instantly. The tears vanished, replaced by a snarl of pure venom. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Fine, she spat. Be that way. But do not think you are walking away from this clean. If you do not give me that money, I will make sure there is not a single person in this city who respects you. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the diplomas on my wall shook. I thought she was bluffing. I was wrong. By Thursday morning, the rumors had spread through the hospital like a virus. I walked into the doctor's lounge to get coffee, and 3 residents immediately stopped talking and looked down at their phones. I heard giggles in the elevator. Finally, my head nurse Brenda pulled me aside. "Dr. Brooks," she whispered, looking pained. "You need to see this." She opened Facebook. There, on the community page for the prestigious Hills HOA, was a post from Sarah. It did not name me directly, but it didn't have to. It breaks my heart to see a prominent female doctor at St. Jude abusing her power, Sarah had written. Forcing young male interns to sleep with her in exchange for recommendations is a new low. We need to protect our young men from predators in positions of authority. Hashtag #MeToo, hashtag St. Jude, hashtag corruption. The comments were exploding. People were tagging the medical board. People were speculating. Sarah had not just insulted me, she had accused me of sexual harassment, the very thing Terrence was guilty of. It was a projection so vile it made my stomach turn. She was trying to destroy my license to force me into submission. I handed the phone back to Brenda. My hands were steady. "Thank you, Brenda," I said. "Get back to work." I went back to my office and locked the door. I did not call a lawyer to sue for libel. That would take too long. Sarah needed to be stopped now. I called Mr. Vance, my private investigator. "Find out who holds Sarah Brooks's debt," I said. "I want a name and a number within the hour." 40 minutes later, Mr. Vance texted me a number. It belonged to a shell company used by a notorious local lending syndicate known for their aggressive collection tactics. I called the number. A man with a thick, raspy voice answered. "Yeah, this is Dr. Vivian Brooks," I said. "You hold a note for Sarah Brooks. 50,000 principal, 20,000 interest." There was a pause. "You calling to pay for her lady. She is running out of time. I am calling to make a business transaction." I said, my voice cutting through the static. "I will wire you the full $70,000 immediately. Today." I could hear the man smiling through the phone. "Smart move. We like prompt payment. But there is a condition," I continued. "I am not paying her debt off. I am buying it. You are going to transfer the promissory note and the lien on her collateral to me. I want to be the legal holder of her debt." The man laughed. "You want to be the shark. I like your style, Doc. As long as the check clears, I do not care who breaks her legs." I wired the money 10 minutes later. By Friday afternoon, the legal documents were in my inbox. I now owned Sarah. I owned the debt she had secured against her house, the house I had technically bought for them, but allowed them to live in under a complex lease-to-own agreement that she had just violated by taking out a second lien. I sat in my leather chair as the sun began to set over the Chicago skyline. I pulled up Sarah's contact on my phone. She had blocked me on social media after posting her lies, but she had not blocked my number, hoping I would cave and send the money. I typed a message. "Hello, Sarah. I saw your post on Facebook. Very creative. I also had a chat with your friends at the lending agency. Good news, they are not coming for you anymore." I paused, imagining her reading this, the wave of relief washing over her. Then I typed the next part. "Bad news. I bought your debt. I am your creditor now. And unlike the loan sharks, I know exactly where you live because I own the deed. You have until Saturday night at midnight to pay me $70,000 in full. If you do not, I am exercising my right to foreclose on your home immediately. You and Marcus will be on the street by Sunday morning." And Sarah, I charge late fees. I hit send. I watched the delivery receipt turn from sent to read. Then the 3 dots of a typing bubble appeared. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. My phone rang. It was Sarah. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined it again. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights flicker on. She wanted a predator. She just found one. But I wasn't hunting for sex or power. I was hunting for justice, and the hunt was just getting started. Monday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. Sarah had gone completely silent since I bought her debt. She was terrified knowing that one wrong move would leave her homeless. With my sister-in-law neutralized, I turned my attention to the head of the snake, Terrence. I walked into his office, which used to be my father's office, and found him standing over a large architectural blueprint spread across the desk. He was manic, his eyes wide and feverish. He looked like a man who was trying to outrun an avalanche by building a snowman. "Vivian, good you are here," Terrence said, not looking up. "We need to talk about Saturday. The gala. It needs to be bigger." I closed the door behind me and sat down. I did not ask permission. I simply sat. "The gala is in 5 days, Terrence," I said calmly. "The budget is already stretched thin. We cannot make it bigger." Terrence waved his hand dismissively. "The budget is irrelevant. This is not just a party anymore. This is a rebranding." After the rumors Sarah started and the incident in the ER, the hospital's reputation is taking a hit. We need to control the narrative. We need to show the city that St. Jude is entering a new golden age. He stood up and walked to the window looking out at the skyline. "I have decided to change the theme. It is no longer a legacy of care. That is too old-fashioned. It is too... you." I raised an eyebrow. "And what is the new theme?" Terrence turned around, a grin spreading across his face. "Phoenix Rising. It symbolizes rebirth, innovation, youth. And that is why I am using the night to announce the new leadership structure." I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew exactly what was coming. "You mean your promotion of Kayla?" I asked. Terrence nodded. "Exactly. She is going to be the new vice president of patient experience. It is a new role I created for her. She will be the face of the hospital. The public loves a young, vibrant woman. It makes us look modern." I stared at him. "You are going to make a 21-year-old intern who nearly killed a councilman last week the vice president of the hospital." Terrence slammed his hand on the desk. "She did not kill him, Vivian. Stop living in the past." "And yes, I am. Because unlike you, she supports my vision. She does not question me. She does not hoard money. Speaking of money, that is the other thing." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an invoice from a luxury event planning company. The total at the bottom was $500,000. "We need to upgrade the venue decor," Terrence said. "Kayla wants white orchids imported from Thailand. She wants a champagne tower that reaches the ceiling. And she wants a private performance by a Grammy-winning artist. The hospital accounts are currently tied up in the audit I ordered to clear my name. So I need you to write a personal check to cover this." I picked up the invoice. $500,000, $500,000, for a party to celebrate his mistress. "You want me to pay for the event where you promote your girlfriend?" I asked, my voice dangerously steady. Terrence laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "Do not call her that. It is professional. And yes, I want you to pay for it. Consider it an investment in your family legacy. If the hospital fails, your shares are worthless. So really, you are paying to save yourself." He leaned in close, his cologne suffocating me. "And one more thing, Vivian. You will write the check, but you will not be speaking on stage. In fact, it is better if you stay in the VIP box. We do not want to confuse the donors with mixed messaging. Tonight is about the future, and you represent the past." The insult hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He was asking me to fund my own erasure. He wanted my money, but he wanted me invisible. In any other universe, I would have thrown the paper in his face. I would have screamed. But I was not playing his game anymore. I was playing a game he did not even know the rules to. I looked at the invoice. Then I looked at Terrence. "You are right," I said softly. Terrence blinked, surprised. "I am." "Yes," I continued. "The hospital needs a fresh start. And if this gala is going to save the legacy my father built, then no expense should be spared." I reached into my bag and pulled out my checkbook. Not my primary one. The one connected to the family trust account, The specific account that Mr. Henderson and the FBI had frozen at 9 a.m. this morning as part of the active embezzlement investigation. I opened the book. I uncapped my pen. The scratching sound of the nib on the paper was the only sound in the room. $500,000. I signed my name with a flourish. "Here you go, Terrence," I said, tearing the check out and handing it to him. "Make it a night to remember." Terrence took the check, his eyes lighting up with greed. He did not check the account number. He did not ask if the funds were liquid. He just saw the zeros. "Thank you, Vivian," he said, tucking it into his pocket. "You are finally being reasonable. Oh, and Kayla wanted to know if she could borrow your diamond earrings for the night. Since you won't be on stage, you won't need them, right?" I smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. "Tell her she can wear whatever she wants," I said. "It will be a night full of surprises." I stood up and walked out of the office. I did not go home. I went to the hospital's print center in the basement. I had a special printing job to do. I sat at the computer and pulled up the guest list for the gala. I scrolled past the donors, past the politicians, past the socialites. I went to the section labeled Board of Directors. Terrence had instructed the secretary not to invite the full board, fearing they would ask questions about the budget. He had only invited his cronies. I selected the Select All button. I printed 50 new invitations on heavy cream-colored cardstock. But these were not the standard invites Terrence had sent out. These had a small handwritten note at the bottom. Agenda Item 1, Immediate Vote of No Confidence. I stuffed the envelopes, my hands moving with mechanical precision. But I was not done. I had 2 more invitations to address. I picked up a pen and wrote the first name. Special Agent David Vance, FBI White Collar Crimes Division. I wrote the second name. District Attorney Marcus Thorne. I sealed the envelopes. I ran my thumb over the embossed hospital logo. Terrence wanted a phoenix rising. He wanted a fire. Well, I was going to give him one, but he forgot that when a phoenix rises, it burns everything around it to ash first. I walked to the mailbox outside the hospital. The metal clank of the mailbox door opening sounded like the gavel of a judge. I dropped the letters inside. I checked my watch. It was 5 p.m. The check I gave Terrence would take 48 hours to process. By the time the bank flagged it as a frozen asset, the flowers would be ordered, the champagne would be poured, and Terrence would be standing on stage. He would bounce a $500,000 check in front of the entire city. And that would be the least of his problems. I walked to my car, humming a tune my father used to whistle. The trap was set. The bait was taken. All I had to do now was dress for the slaughter. The countdown to the Phoenix Rising Gala had officially begun, and the hospital was buzzing with a nervous energy that felt more like a prelude to a disaster than a celebration. While Terrence was busy screaming at florists about the shade of white orchids and Sarah was frantically trying to raise money to save her house, I decided to retreat to my sanctuary. I maintained a private executive suite on the top floor of the hospital, a space that was separate from my office. It was a place where I could shower after a 30-hour surgery sleep when the weather was too bad to drive home, and keep a wardrobe of formal wear for last-minute donor dinners. Inside that walk-in closet hung a garment that was more than just fabric to me. It was a custom-made emerald green silk gown from a fashion house in Paris. I had flown to France 2 years ago to have it fitted. It cost $20,000, and it was the dress I had worn the night I accepted the Surgeon of the Year award. It was elegant, floor-length, and commanded respect. Since Terrence had banned me from the stage, I had decided I would wear it to the gala anyway. I would sit in the VIP box looking like a queen, reminding everyone that while Terrence held the microphone, I held the crown. I keyed my code into the door of my private suite. The light turned green, but when I pushed the door open, I felt a strange draft. The air inside, usually smelling of lavender and sterile cleanliness, smelled faintly of cheap vanilla perfume and hairspray. My stomach dropped. I walked straight to the closet. The door was wide open. My eyes scanned the racks. My lab coats were there. My spare suits were there. but the space where the emerald gown had hung was empty. The velvet hanger lay on the floor, snapped in half, as if someone had yanked the dress down with violent force. I stood there staring at the empty space. It was not a burglary. A burglar would have taken the safe or the electronics. This was personal. This was a violation of my identity. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from Instagram. I had created a burner account weeks ago to monitor Kayla, and she had just started a live stream. I opened the app. The video load screen swirled for a second, and then Kayla's face filled the frame. She was in a bathroom, not just any bathroom. She was in the master bathroom of the penthouse Terrence had rented for her with the charity money. "Hey guys, welcome back to my channel," Kayla chirped, adjusting the ring light. "So for the gala tomorrow, I wanted to wear something that screams boss babe, but like make it sexy. I found this old dusty dress in the storage closet at the hospital. It was huge and looked like a grandma curtain, so I decided to do a little DIY project. Watch this transformation." She stepped back from the camera. My breath caught in my throat. She was wearing my dress, my $20,000 Parisian silk gown, but it was no longer floor length. Kayla picked up a pair of kitchen scissors. With a giggle, she grabbed the hem of the silk. "It is way too long," she said to her followers. "We need to show some leg." I watched in horror as she hacked at the fabric. The jagged blades sliced through the delicate silk that had been hand-stitched by artisans. She cut it all the way up to her mid-thigh, turning a gown of regal elegance into a jagged, uneven mini dress that looked cheap and trashy. "There," she said, twirling around. The raw edges of the fabric were fraying. She took a handful of safety pins and started pinning the bodice tighter, pulling the fabric until it strained against her chest. "Now it fits. What do you guys think? Do I look like the Queen of St. Jude or what?" Comments started rolling in. "Fire emoji? Slay Queen? That color is everything." I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from sadness. It was the adrenaline of a hunter who just watched the prey step directly into the trap. She had recorded herself stealing property worth over $10,000. In the state of Illinois, that was a Class 2 felony. She had recorded herself destroying it, and she had admitted she found it in the hospital storage, confirming she had trespassed into my private suite. I took a screenshot of the video. Then I screen recorded the entire segment where she cut the fabric. I looked at her on the screen, preening and posing in the ruins of my dress. "Wear it, Kayla," I whispered to the empty room. "Wear it in good health. Because that dress is going to be the most expensive mistake of your life. It is not a party dress anymore. It is evidence." I walked over to the mirror in my suite. I looked at myself in my simple work clothes. I did not need a gown to be powerful. I had something better. My laptop on the desk chimed with a priority email alert. The subject line made my heart stop and then restart with a heavy, powerful thud. "Sender D. Vance Forensic Accounting, subject urgent, final audit report completed." I sat down at the desk. I opened the file. It was a 50-page PDF dense with numbers and bank routing codes. But the executive summary on the first page told me everything I needed to know. Mr. Vance had traced the shell company Blue Horizon Medical Supply. He had found the invoices, but what he found next was something even I had not anticipated. Terrence had not just been stealing profit margins, he had been diverting funds from the restricted grants, specifically the Pediatric Oncology Drug Fund. I read the paragraph twice to make sure I was not hallucinating. Analysis confirms that $3 million allocated for purchasing chemotherapy. Agent cisplatin for the Children's Cancer Ward was diverted on February 14th to the Cayman Islands account. As a result, the hospital inventory shows a critical shortage of life-saving medication for 25 pediatric patients. I sat back in my chair. The room spun. They were not just thieves. They were monsters. Terrence had bought a Porsche and rented a penthouse with money that was supposed to save children with leukemia. He was literally killing kids to fund his midlife crisis. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was a tear of mourning for the man I thought I had married. The man who had sworn an oath to do no harm, that man was dead. The creature sitting in the CEO's office was a parasite. I looked at the screenshot of Kayla in my cut-up dress. I looked at the report detailing the stolen cancer drugs. The puzzle was complete. The dress was grand larceny. The money was federal embezzlement and fraud. I printed the report. I printed the screenshots. I put them into a sleek black leather folder. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the FBI agent who was handling my case. "Agent Vance," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "Dr. Brooks," he answered. "We are reviewing the files you sent. This is extensive." "I have more," I said. "He stole $3 million from the Children's Cancer Fund, and his mistress just posted a video confessing to grand larceny of my personal property." There was a silence on the line. Then Agent Vance spoke, his voice hard. "We have enough for a warrant, Doctor. But we need to serve it when they are together to prevent them from destroying evidence or tipping each other off." I looked out the window at the city below, the lights twinkling like diamonds. "Tomorrow night," I said. "The Phoenix Rising Gala. They will both be on stage at 8 p.m. They will be surrounded by the press. There will be nowhere to run." "We will be there," Agent Vance said. I hung up. I looked at the empty space in my closet one last time. You wanted to be a star, Kayla. You wanted all eyes on you. You wanted to wear the crown. Well, tomorrow night, you are going to get your wish. You are going to be the center of attention. And that green dress is going to look spectacular in the mugshot. The flashes of the cameras were blinding, turning the hospital atrium into a chaotic sea of white light. It was 24 hours before the Phoenix Rising Gala, and Terrence had called a press conference to stroke his own ego one last time before the main event. I stood on the second-floor balcony, hidden behind a row of decorative ferns, looking down at the spectacle. Terrence stood at the podium, looking every inch the successful CEO. He was wearing a custom navy suit, his teeth whitened to perfection, and he was holding court with the city's top journalists. Beside him, Sarah was beaming, acting the part of the supportive sister, while Kayla stood slightly behind him, checking her reflection in the glass of a framed award. "Thank you all for coming," Terrence bellowed, his voice amplified by the expensive sound system. "Tomorrow night is not just a party, it is a declaration. St. Jude is entering a new era of innovation and profitability. For too long, this institution has been held back by outdated traditions and conservative spending. But under my leadership, we are finally breaking free." A reporter from the Chicago Tribune raised his hand. "Mr. Brooks, there have been rumors about internal friction between you and your wife, Dr. Vivian Brooks. She is the daughter of the founder. Does she support this new direction?" I leaned forward, gripping the railing. This was the moment. Terrence chuckled, a condescending sound that grated on my nerves. He leaned into the microphone, putting on a face of mock humility. "Look, I love my wife. Vivian is a wonderful woman. She is a fantastic surgeon. But let us be honest. Vision requires a certain boldness. Vivian is very traditional. She is great at the small details like stitching up wounds or organizing the filing cabinets, but she lacks the big picture mindset. She is the perfect support system, the woman behind the man, if you will, but she is not a leader. That is why she has graciously agreed to step back and let me drive the ship. She knows her place is in the operating room, not the boardroom." The crowd laughed politely. Sarah nodded vigorously. Kayla smirked. He had just publicly reduced me to a secretary. He had erased my ownership, my legacy, and my intelligence in 30 seconds. He called me the help. I pulled my phone out. I did not record this to cry over later. I sent the live stream link directly to Agent Vance at the FBI with a simple caption: "Add this to the file: public defamation and misrepresentation of corporate structure." I turned and walked away. I had heard enough. I took the elevator down to the surgical wing. I needed to check on a post-op patient before leaving for the day. As the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, I heard a commotion near the nurses' station. It was Kayla. She was wearing a white blazer that was unbuttoned to reveal a lace bralette, and she was screaming at Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson was the head charge nurse of the surgical floor. She was 60 years old, a woman who had worked alongside my father for 3 decades. She was royalty in this hospital. And Kayla was pointing a finger in her face. "I said I want the VIP suite cleared for my friends to get IV drips," Kayla yelled. "They are hungover and they need hydration before the gala." Mrs. Johnson stood her ground, her face calm but stern. "Miss Jenkins, the VIP suite is for critical patients. I have a kidney transplant recovery in there. I am not moving a patient so your friends can recover from a party." Kayla stomped her foot. "Do you know who I am? I am the Vice President of Patient Experience. I am your boss." Mrs. Johnson sighed, a look of profound exhaustion on her face. Then she looked over Kayla's shoulder and saw me approaching. Her face softened instantly. "Good afternoon, Dr. Brooks," Mrs. Johnson said, nodding respectfully. Kayla spun around. She saw me, and then she snapped. The jealousy that had been simmering in her erupted. "Why do you talk to her like that?" Kayla shrieked. "She is a nobody. Her husband just said on TV that she is useless. I am the one in charge. Look at me when I am talking to you, Mrs." Johnson looked back at Kayla. "I respect Dr. Brooks because she saves lives, Miss Jenkins. Respect is earned, not sleeping your way into." The slap echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Kayla had swung her hand with all her might, striking Mrs. Johnson across the cheek. The older woman stumbled back, clutching her face, her glasses flying off onto the linoleum floor. The entire floor went silent. Doctors, nurses, and patients froze. "You are fired!" Kayla screamed, her chest heaving. "Get your stuff and get out! Nobody talks to me like that!" I walked forward. The rage inside me was a cold, solid thing. I helped Mrs. Johnson up. I picked up her glasses. I checked her cheek, which was already turning red. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. Mrs. Johnson nodded, tears of humiliation in her eyes. "I am fine, doctor." I turned to Kayla. She was panting, looking at her hand as if surprised by her own violence, but then she steeled herself, lifting her chin defiantly. "What are you going to do, Vivian?" she sneered. "Tell on me. Go ahead. Terrence will just say she attacked me first." I looked at her. I looked at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. I looked at the 10 witnesses standing around us. "I am not going to do anything, Kayla," I said. Kayla laughed. "That is what I thought. You are weak." I leaned in close to her. "Save your energy," I whispered. "You are going to need it for the mugshot." I turned to Mrs. Johnson. "Go to HR. File a police report for assault. Do not worry about Terrence. He won't be here to fire you on Monday." I walked away, leaving Kayla screaming insults at my back. I went straight to the parking garage. I drove my car to a nondescript office building in downtown Chicago, far away from the prying eyes of the hospital staff. I took the elevator to the 10th floor. The sign on the door read, "Henderson and Associates Attorneys at Law." I walked into the conference room. The air was thick with tension. Mr. Henderson was sitting at the head of the table. To his right sat Agent Vance of the FBI. To his left was the Chief of Police, a man my father had played poker with for 20 years. "Dr. Brooks," Agent Vance said, standing up. "Please sit down." I sat. I placed my hands on the table. They were steady. "Did you see the press conference?" I asked. "We did," Mr. Henderson said. "And we just received the report on the assault of Mrs. Johnson." Agent Vance slid a thick stack of documents across the table toward me. "These are the federal indictments," Agent Vance said. "We have enough for Terrence Brooks on 5 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of embezzlement, and 1 count of conspiracy. We also have a warrant for Sarah Brooks for mortgage fraud and accessory to embezzlement." "And Kayla?" I asked. The Chief of Police spoke up. "We have a state warrant for Kayla Jenkins, grand larceny for the dress, assault and battery for Mrs. Johnson, practicing medicine without a license for the incident in the ER. She is looking at 10 to 15 years minimum." I looked at the papers. The signatures of the judges were fresh ink at the bottom. These were not just threats. These were the end of their lives. When do we execute? The chief asked. We can pick them up tonight at the rehearsal dinner. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. No, I repeated. Tonight is too quiet. If you arrest them tonight, they can spin the story. They can say it is a misunderstanding. They can post bail before the morning news. I looked at Agent Vance. I want you to do it tomorrow night. At the gala. But there will be 500 civilians there, Agent Vance argued. It could be chaotic. That is the point, I said, my voice hard. Terrence wants to be the man of the year. He wants an audience. I paid $500,000 for that party, Agent Vance. I want to see a show. I want you to wait until he is on stage. I want you to wait until he introduces Kayla as the vice president. I want you to wait until they think they have won everything. And then I want you to walk in. Mr. Henderson looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. That is cold, Vivian, he said. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. He missed my father's funeral to eat oysters in Cabo, I said. He stole cancer drugs from children to buy a Porsche. He slapped my head nurse. I walked to the door. Cold is not the word, gentlemen. This is not revenge. This is a surgical extraction of a tumor. Make sure your agents are in formal wear. It is a black tie event. I walked out into the night. The city wind whipped around me, but I did not feel it. I felt only the anticipation of the fire. The phoenix was about to rise, but it wasn't Terrence. It was me. And I was bringing the matches. The grand ballroom of the St. Jude Medical Center had been transformed into a temple of excess. Terrence had gotten exactly what he wanted. The theme Phoenix Rising was executed with a vulgar display of wealth that made my stomach turn. Thousands of white orchids imported from Thailand at a cost that could have funded a nurse's salary for a year cascaded from the ceiling like a floral waterfall. A 10-foot-tall ice sculpture of a mythical bird dominated the center of the room, slowly melting into a pool of premium vodka. The air smelled of expensive perfumed truffle oil and the distinct metallic scent of hypocrisy. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra was playing a soft, elegant waltz masking the rot that lay beneath the surface. From my vantage point, I could see them, the unholy trinity. Terrence stood near the champagne tower looking every inch the benevolent monarch. He was laughing, tilting his head back, his hand resting possessively on the shoulder of a major donor. He looked like a man who believed he had won the lottery, the presidency, and the Super Bowl all in one day. Next to him was Kayla. Seeing her in person wearing my dress was a visceral shock. On the live stream, the desecration of the garment had looked bad. In person, it was tragic. The emerald green silk, which was meant to flow to the floor in a pool of elegance, had been hacked off mid-thigh with kitchen scissors. The hem was uneven and fraying. She had tried to fix the fit with safety pins that glinted under the chandeliers. She looked cheap. She looked like a child playing dress-up in a stolen wardrobe. But in her mind, she was the queen. She was beaming, clutching a glass of vintage Dom Perignon, accepting compliments from people who were too polite or too afraid to tell her she looked ridiculous. And circling them like a shark in a satin dress was Sarah. My sister-in-law was working the room with a frantic energy. She was laughing too loudly, drinking too fast. She thought she had beaten me. She thought that by ignoring my deadline she had called my bluff. She had no idea that the process server was currently parking his car in the loading dock, carrying the foreclosure papers that would be taped to her front door at dawn. I took a deep breath. I was not wearing a gown. I was not wearing diamonds. I was dressed for war. I had chosen a white bespoke Alexander McQueen suit. The trousers were sharp enough to cut glass, and the blazer was structured, authoritative, and blindingly bright amidst the sea of black ties. It was the color of a doctor's coat. It was the color of truth. I had pulled my hair back into a severe, sleek bun and wore no jewelry except for my wedding band, which I intended to remove publicly before the night was over. I began to descend the stairs. The sound of my heels on the marble steps was rhythmic and deliberate. Click, click, click. At first, no one noticed. But then a few heads turned. Then a few more. A ripple of silence began to spread outward from the staircase, moving through the crowd like a wave. The laughter died down. The clinking of glasses stopped. Even the orchestra seemed to falter for a beat before recovering. All eyes were on the woman in white, the woman who was supposed to be at home crying over her lost legacy. I kept my chin high, my expression unreadable. I saw the faces of the board members I had secretly invited. They were clustered near the bar, watching me with intense interest. I saw Mrs. Johnson, my head nurse, standing by the emergency exit with her arms crossed, a small vindictive smile playing on her lips. And scattered throughout the room, blending in perfectly in their rented tuxedos, were 6 men and women who were not drinking. They were watching. Agent Vance caught my eye from across the room and gave a barely perceptible nod. The trap was primed. I reached the bottom of the stairs and the crowd parted for me. It was not out of kindness. It was out of fear. I walked through the corridor of people heading straight for the champagne tower where my husband and his mistress were holding court. Kayla saw me first. Her smile faltered and she nudged Terrence hard in the ribs. Terrence turned around. The color drained from his face instantly, leaving him a pale waxen gray. He looked at my suit. He looked at the silent crowd watching us. For a second, I saw pure panic in his eyes. He had spent the last week erasing me, telling everyone I was weak, emotional, and unfit to lead. And here I was, looking more powerful than he had ever been in his life. He excused himself from the donor he was talking to and marched toward me, intercepting me before I could reach the microphone. "Vivian," he hissed through a clenched jaw, grabbing my elbow with a force that would leave a bruise. "What the hell are you doing here?" I looked down at his hand on my sleeve, then up at his eyes. "Hello, Terrence. Happy anniversary." He squeezed harder, pulling me closer so no one else could hear. "Do not play games with me. I told you to stay home. I told you this night was about the future. You are embarrassing me. You look like a ghost in that suit. Go back to the car before I have security drag you out." Kayla appeared at his shoulder, looking me up and down with a sneer. "Oh my God, Vivienne," she laughed, though her voice was shrill. "Did you confuse the gala for a business meeting? That suit is so tragic. And where are your diamonds?" "Oh, wait. I am wearing them." She touched her ears, flashing the diamond studs that Terrence had stolen from my jewelry box. I looked at her. I looked at the frayed hem of my green silk dress. "You made some alterations," I said calmly. "It is certainly a look." Kayla flipped her hair. "It is called Fashion Vivian. You would not understand. Now leave. Nobody wants you here. You are ruining the vibe." Terrence leaned in, his breath hot and smelling of scotch. "Listen to me. You are going to turn around, walk out that door, and tomorrow we are going to have a very long talk about your attitude. If you make a scene tonight, I swear to God I will have you declared mentally incompetent. I will take your power of attorney. Do you understand me?" I looked around the room. I saw Sarah watching us, looking nervous. I saw the waiters pausing with their trays. I saw the giant ice phoenix dripping water onto the floor, slowly losing its shape. I pulled my arm free from his grip with a sharp, violent jerk. "I am not going anywhere, Terrence," I said, my voice projecting just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Terrence's eyes bulged. "I forbid you to stay. This is my party. I organized it." I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has already tasted blood. "Actually, Terrence," I said, brushing invisible dust off my white lapel, "I paid $500,000 for this party. I paid for the orchids. I paid for the ice sculpture. I paid for the champagne you are holding." I took a step closer, invading his personal space. "And when I pay for a show, Terrence, I stay until the final curtain call." Terrence opened his mouth to argue, but the lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The music swelled to a dramatic crescendo. "It is time," a stage manager whispered into his headset, gesturing frantically for Terrence to take the stage. Terrence looked at me, torn between his rage and his vanity. The spotlight was calling him. The audience was waiting. He fixed his tie, glaring at me one last time. Fine, he spat. Stand in the corner and keep your mouth shut. But after tonight, you are finished. He grabbed Kayla's hand. Come on, babe. Let us go make history. Kayla shot me a triumphant smirk and strutted toward the stage, her jagged dress hem fluttering. Terrence followed, plastering a fake smile on his face as he stepped into the light. I watched them go. I folded my hands in front of me. Make history, I whispered. Oh, Terrence, you have no idea. I turned slightly to my left. Agent Vance was standing 5 feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water. Is it time? He asked quietly. Not yet, I said, watching Terrence take the microphone. Let him climb to the very top of the mountain. I want the fall to be lethal. Terrence raised his hands, silencing the applause. Welcome, everyone, to the future of St. Jude, he boomed. I leaned back against a pillar, crossing my arms. Proceed, CEO, I thought. Dig your grave. I brought the shovel. The applause was thunderous as Terrence stood at the center of the stage. He soaked it in, spreading his arms wide, as if he were trying to physically embrace the adoration of the 500 wealthy donors sitting in the dark. Beside him, Kayla struck a pose, clutching her stolen clutch bag, beaming like she had just won a beauty pageant. She had no idea that the safety pin holding the hem of her ruined green dress was glistening under the stage lights, a tiny silver beacon of her theft. Thank you, Terrence boomed into the microphone, his voice rich with false humility. Thank you for believing in my vision. When I took over as CEO, people said I was too ambitious. They said I wanted to move too fast. But look around you. This is what ambition looks like. This is the new St. Jude. He paused for effect, wiping a fake tear from his eye. But I did not get here alone, he continued, glancing at the teleprompter. I want to share a special presentation with you all. A short film that captures the spirit of our leadership and the integrity of our team. Please turn your attention to the main screen. Terrence gestured dramatically to the massive projection screen behind him, which was currently displaying the Phoenix Rising logo. The house lights dimmed until the ballroom was pitched in darkness, save for the blue glow of the screen. The orchestra fell silent. The room held its breath, expecting a montage of smiling children and cutting-edge surgery. I stood in the back, next to the sound booth. I watched the silhouette of the technician, a man I had personally paid $10,000 in cash an hour ago. He gave me a thumbs up. The screen flickered. But instead of the high-definition orchestral intro Terrence had paid for, the image was grainy. It was low-quality black-and-white security footage. The date stamp in the corner read 2 weeks ago. The location tag read Main Lobby. A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. On the screen, a figure appeared. It was Kayla. She was holding a coffee cup and her phone. She looked exactly as she did now, arrogant and distracted. And then Vivian Brooks walked into the frame. The audio cracked through the high-end speakers, loud and shrill. Excuse me, watch where you are going. The audience gasped. They watched in horror as the woman on screen, the same woman currently standing on stage, smiling, threw a cup of hot coffee directly onto the chest of the chief of surgery. I am talking to a nobody who clearly cannot afford to shop where I shop. The recorded voice of Kayla screamed, echoing off the ballroom walls. My husband is Terrence Brooks, the CEO of this hospital. On stage, Kayla's smile froze. She took a step back, her eyes darting around wildly. Terrence looked at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He turned to the side of the stage, waving frantically at the sound engineer to cut the feed. Cut it, he yelled, but his microphone had been cut. His voice was just a shout in the dark. The video did not stop. It cut to a new scene. This time the camera angle was low and tilted, filming from underneath a chair. It was the footage from my secret recorder in Terrence's office. The image was of Terrence's legs and the terrified face of Mrs. Brenda, the head nurse, sitting across from him. The audio was crystal clear. It was the voice of a monster. If you do not sign it, Brenda, I will fire you for gross negligence, effective immediately. You will lose your pension. You will lose your health insurance. The crowd went deathly silent. This was not just drama. This was blackmail. This was a crime. I will make sure you never work in this city again, the voice of Terrence threatened on the screen. I looked at the VIP table near the front. The city councilman, the one Kayla had nearly killed, was sitting there. He slowly stood up, his face turning a dark shade of purple. Next to him, the members of the board of directors I had invited were exchanging horrified glances. On stage, Terrence lunged for the laptop on the podium, trying to smash it. But the video was not coming from the podium. It was coming from the control room. "Stop it!" Terrence screamed, his composure completely shattered. "This is fake! This is AI generated! Stop this now!" But the video cut again. The final image was not a video. It was a series of screenshots. They were text messages on a background that everyone recognized. It was the interface of WhatsApp. The contact name at the top read Sarah, sister-in-law. A woman in the front row gasped. Sarah, who had been standing proudly near the stage, dropped her champagne glass. It shattered the sound, piercing the tense silence. The messages scrolled slowly so everyone could read them. Sarah. He actually bought it. Terrence is such an idiot. He is so easy to manipulate. I told him Vivian was plotting against him, and he gave me another $5,000. Terrence. Good job. Keep him paranoid. As long as he thinks he is the king, we can drain the accounts dry. Sarah. Do you think he knows about the kickbacks from the construction crew? Terrence. He does not know anything unless I tell him. He is just a wallet with an ego. Once we move the money to the Caymans, we can dump him too. The screen froze on that last message. He is just a wallet with an ego. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Terrence stood center stage, bathed in the blue light of his own humiliation. He slowly turned his head to look at Sarah. Sarah was shaking her head, backing away, her hands raised in surrender. "It is not real," Sarah squeaked, her voice trembling. "Terrence, she hacked my phone. She changed the texts. You know I love you. We are family." Terrence looked at her with eyes full of betrayal. Then he looked at the screen, then at the audience. 500 faces were staring back at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. The facade was gone. The phoenix had not risen. It had crashed and burned in spectacular fashion. Suddenly a high-pitched scream tore through the air. "Turn it off!" Kayla shrieked. She grabbed a bottle of champagne from a passing waiter's tray and hurled it at the screen. The bottle bounced off the canvas harmlessly and shattered on the floor. "You are ruining my night!" Kayla screamed, stomping her feet like a toddler. "This is my party. I am the vice president. Stop looking at me like that." She ran to the edge of the stage, pointing a shaking finger at the darkness. "Where are you, Vivian? I know you are doing this. Come out and fight me, you coward. You are just jealous because I am young and beautiful and you are old and alone." I stepped out from the shadows of the pillar. The spotlight operator, following my previous instructions, cut the light on the stage and swung the beam directly onto me. I stood there in my white suit, glowing in the darkness. I did not look angry. I did not look sad. I looked like a judge delivering a verdict. I walked slowly toward the stage. The crowd parted for me again, but this time there was no fear. There was awe. "I am right here, Kayla," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone in the stunned silence of the room. I walked until I was standing right below them. I looked up at Terrence, who was gripping the podium like it was a life raft. I looked at Kayla, who was panting, her chest, heaving, mascara running down her face. "I am not the one who is alone," I said, calm as ice. "Look around you, Terrence. Look at your friends. Look at your donors. Look at your sister-in-law who just admitted to using you." Terrence looked. He saw the disgust on their faces. He saw the board members pulling out their phones, presumably calling their lawyers. "You did this?" Terrence whispered, his voice broken. "You ruined everything." "No, Terrence," I said, checking my watch. I just turned on the lights. I gestured to the main double doors at the back of the ballroom. And I believe your ride is here. The doors burst open, but it was not the caterers. 6 agents in FBI windbreakers marched in, followed by 4 uniformed police officers. The gold letters on their jackets caught the light. FBI. Agent Vance was in the lead. He walked straight down the aisle, his eyes locked on the stage. He did not look like a party guest anymore. He looked like the hammer of justice. Panic erupted on stage. Kayla tried to run toward the backstage exit, but 2 officers emerged from behind the curtain, blocking her path. Sarah tried to blend into the crowd, but Mrs. Johnson stepped in front of her, crossing her arms and blocking her way, with a smile that was pure vengeance. Terrence did not run. He collapsed against the podium, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, staring blankly at the screen that was still displaying the evidence of his stupidity. I turned my back on the stage and looked at Agent Vance. "They are all yours, Agent," I said. The show was over. The real work was about to begin. The silence that followed my entrance onto the stage was heavier than the air in a tomb. 500 of the city's most powerful people were holding their breath, their eyes darting between the ruined man trembling at the podium and the woman in the white suit standing before him like an avenging angel. I could hear the hum of the stage lights. I could hear the frantic, ragged breathing of Kayla, who was clutching the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I did not look at the audience. I did not look at the cameras. I locked my eyes on Terrence. For 10 years, this man had made me feel small. He had critiqued my appearance, minimized my intelligence, and spent my inheritance as if it were his birthright. He had stood on this very stage minutes ago and called me a useless support system. But as I stood less than a foot away from him, I did not see a CEO. I saw a frightened, sweating con artist who had just realized the game was rigged against him. I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He did not fight me for it. His fingers were limp, his strength sapped by the public exposure of his crimes. I turned to face the room. The spotlight hit me, reflecting off my white Alexander McQueen suit, making me look radiant. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and clear, echoing through the ballroom speakers, "I apologize for the interruption. My husband promised you a night of Phoenix Rising. He promised you a new era. And he was right. But a phoenix cannot rise until the ashes are swept away." I turned back to the trio of traitors standing frozen behind me. "Terrence," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was cold enough to freeze the melting ice sculpture behind him. "You have spent the last 6 months trying to steal my hospital. You forged my signature. You embezzled $3 million from the Pediatric Cancer Fund. And you violated every ethical standard of your profession." Terrence opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to spin a narrative, but I cut him off. As the chairman of the board and the majority shareholder of St. Jude Medical Center, I am exercising the founder's veto effective immediately. Terrence, you are fired. Your security clearance is revoked. Your corporate credit cards are canceled, and you are permanently banned from setting foot on any property owned by the Brooks family. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Terrence flinched as if I had struck him. But I was not done. I turned my gaze to Kayla. She shrank back, trying to hide behind Terrence, pulling at the jagged hem of the green silk dress she had stolen from me. She looked young, foolish, and terrified. "Kayla Jenkins," I said, saying her name with the disdain one might use for a disease. "You wanted to be a doctor. You wanted to be a vice president. You wanted to be the face of this hospital. Well, here is your legacy." I took a step closer to her. "You are expelled from the residency program for gross misconduct, patient endangerment, and grand larceny. I have already sent your file to the National Medical Board. You will never practice medicine in this state or any other state for the rest of your life. You are not a doctor, Kayla. You are a liability." Kayla let out a choked sob, her hands flying to her mouth. "No," she whimpered. "You cannot do that. Terrence, do something. Terrence did not move. He was staring at the floor, his world collapsing. Finally, I looked past them down to the front row where Sarah was trying to blend into the shadows, her face pale beneath her heavy makeup. "And Sarah," I said. Sarah froze. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. "I saw the text messages, Sarah. I saw how you called me stupid. I saw how you plotted to help them steal my money so you could buy a villa in Italy. You thought you were clever. You thought you could mock me and rob me at the same time." I paused, letting the silence stretch out until it was unbearable. "You forgot one thing, Sarah. I own your debt. I bought your note 3 days ago. And since you failed to make the payment by midnight tonight, I am accelerating the foreclosure clause." I checked my diamond watch. It is currently 8:15. The locks on your house are being changed as we speak. You have exactly 1 hour to get back there and remove your personal belongings before the sheriff puts a padlock on the door. I suggest you start running. You have a lot of packing to do." Sarah let out a shriek of pure despair. She scrambled over the chairs, tripping over her long red dress, pushing past confused donors as she ran toward the exit in a frantic, humiliating sprint. The room was in chaos. People were whispering, pointing, taking photos. The facade of the happy, powerful family was gone, replaced by the ugly truth of their greed. Terrence finally snapped. The humiliation was too much for his narcissism to bear. His face turned a dark, violent shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged. He looked at the audience, laughing at him. He looked at Kayla, sobbing, and then he looked at me, the woman he thought he had crushed. "You bitch!" he roared. The sound was animalistic. He lunged at me. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I watched him come. He raised his hand, forming a fist, intent on striking me down right there on the stage. Intent on silencing me with violence because he had lost the battle of wits. But he never reached me. From the shadows of the wings, a massive figure emerged. It was not a police officer. It was Marcus, the head of my private security detail, a former linebacker who I had hired specifically for this moment. Marcus moved with a speed that defied his size. He intercepted Terrence mid-lunge. There was a sickening thud as Marcus slammed into Terrence, tackling him with the force of a freight train. They hit the floor of the stage hard. "Get off me!" Terrence screamed, thrashing wildly. "I am the CEO! I am the CEO!" Marcus did not speak. He simply twisted Terrence's arm behind his back and shoved his face into the floorboards. He pressed his knee into Terrence's spine, pinning him down like an insect. I stood over them. I looked down at my husband, the man who had bought a Porsche with my money, the man who had cheated on me, the man who had tried to hit me. His cheek was pressed against the wood. His expensive suit was bunched up, and he was gasping for air. I leaned down, bringing the microphone close to my lips. "You are not the CEO, Terrence." I whispered, my voice amplified so every person in the room could hear the final verdict. "You are just a man who forgot who paid for the suit he is wearing." I straightened up and looked at the audience. "Please excuse the disturbance," I said calmly. "Security is removing the trash." I signaled to Marcus. He hauled Terrence up by the back of his jacket. Terrence was limp, defeated, tears of rage and shame streaming down his face. Marcus dragged him toward the side of the stage, his feet dragging uselessly on the floor. Kayla stood alone on the stage, shivering. She looked at Terrence being dragged away, then she looked at me. "Vivian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. He made me do it." I looked at her one last time. "Save it for the jury, Kayla." I turned and walked toward the stairs. I had delivered the sentence. Now it was time for the executioners to step in. I looked toward the back of the room where Agent Vance was waiting. I gave him a small nod. The real party was just beginning. The doors to the ballroom did not just open, they were breached with a synchronized precision that silenced the orchestra instantly. The 6 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation fanned out across the room, their movements sharp and practiced, turning a gala of excess into a crime scene in the span of 5 seconds. They were followed by a phalanx of uniformed police officers, who secured the exits blocking the path of the terrified socialites, who were now regretting every glass of champagne they had consumed. I stood on the first landing of the grand staircase, just a few feet above the chaos, watching the dismantling of the empire Terence thought he had built. It was like watching a house of cards be hit by a hurricane. The structure did not just fall, it disintegrated. Agent Vance moved directly toward the side of the stage where Marcus was holding Terence. My husband, who had spent the last hour preening like a peacock, was now slumped against the wall, his expensive tuxedo jacket torn at the shoulder, his face slick with sweat and terror. When he saw the FBI windbreakers, a flicker of delusional hope crossed his face. He actually thought they were there to save him from me. Agent Vance. Thank God, Terence gasped, trying to stand up but being shoved back down by Marcus. You need to arrest this man. He assaulted me. And my wife, she has gone insane. She hijacked the presentation. This is corporate sabotage. Agent Vance did not offer a hand to help him up. Instead, he pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. The metallic ratchet sound of the cuffs unlocking echoed through the silent room. Terence Brooks. Agent Vance said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud conspiracy to commit money laundering and the embezzlement of charitable funds under the RICO Act. Terrence's eyes bulged. RICO, he sputtered. That is for mobsters. I am a CEO. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain the accounts. It was just a temporary allocation. Agent Vance grabbed Terrence's wrist and spun him around. The explanation can be saved for the federal grand jury, Mr. Brooks. You are also being charged with healthcare fraud for the misappropriation of pediatric oncology grants. He slammed the cuffs onto Terrence's wrists. Click, click. The sound was final. It was the sound of a coffin lid closing. Terence began to struggle, shouting at the donors who were watching with horrified fascination. Call my lawyer. Someone call the mayor. I donated to his campaign. Get these animals off me. But nobody moved. The mayor, who had been sitting in the front row, was currently busy examining the ceiling, desperate to pretend he had never met Terence Brooks. As two agents hauled Terence toward the exit, dragging him past the very people he had tried to impress, the drama shifted to the center of the dance floor. Sarah was trying to make a run for it. She had kicked off her high heels and was sprinting toward the valet stand near the side entrance, clutching her purse. She reached the valet key rack, her hands shaking violently as she frantically searched for the fob to the Porsche Cayenne. She drove the car that had been bought with the kickback money. Officer, stop her, I said calmly from the stairs. A uniformed officer stepped in front of Sarah just as her fingers closed around a set of keys. He was a large man, impassive and unamused. Going somewhere, ma'am? The officer asked. Sarah recoiled, clutching the keys to her chest. I have a family emergency. My son is sick. I need my car. Get out of my way. The officer held out his hand. That vehicle is registered to a shell company, listed in the federal warrant, Mrs. Brooks. It is considered proceeds of crime. It is being seized as evidence. Hand over the keys. No, Sarah shrieked, clutching them tighter. It is my car. I earned it. You cannot take my car. How am I supposed to get home? The officer did not argue. He simply reached out and pried the keys from her fingers with professional ease. Sarah clawed at his arm, breaking a nail, screaming like a banshee. You are hurting me, she yelled. I will sue you. Do you know who my brother-in-law is? The officer clipped the keys to his belt. Your brother-in-law is currently in federal custody, ma'am. And unless you want to join him for obstruction of justice and assaulting an officer, I suggest you start walking. You have an eviction to get to, do you not? Sarah looked at the keys hanging from his belt, then at the open door where the cold night wind was blowing in. She looked back at me. I raised my glass slightly. She let out a sob of pure misery and ran out the door barefoot, disappearing into the darkness of the parking lot, leaving her dignity on the floor along with her shoes. Finally, there was Kayla. She was still standing on the stage, frozen in the spotlight that had been meant for her coronation. She was hugging herself, shivering, looking small and broken in the ruined green dress. When two female officers approached the stage, Kayla tried to play the only card she had left, the victim card. She burst into fresh tears, falling to her knees. "Please," she wailed, looking at the officers with wide, innocent eyes. "I did not know. He made me do it. I am just a student. I am only 21. He manipulated me. I am a victim here." One of the officers, a woman with a stern face, hopped onto the stage. She was not buying the performance. "Stand up, Miss Jenkins," the officer said. Kayla held out her hands, expecting comfort. Instead, the officer grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "You are under arrest for grand larceny," the officer recited, spinning Kayla around. "What larceny?" Kayla sobbed. "I did not steal anything." The officer pointed to the dress. "That gown is valued at $20,000 and was reported stolen from Dr. Brooks's private suite. You are wearing the evidence, and you destroyed it." Kayla looked down at the frayed hem. "But it is just a dress," she cried. The officer ignored her. "And for the theft of the diamond earrings currently in your ears, and the pearl necklace." The officer reached up and unclasped the necklace, my mother's necklace, from Kayla's neck. She bagged it as evidence. Then she removed the diamond studs. "Ow, you are scratching me," Kayla whined. The officer then pulled out the handcuffs. "And for the assault on Mrs. Johnson, we have the video, Miss Jenkins. You are not a victim. You are a suspect. Turn around." When the cold steel touched Kayla's skin, reality finally broke through her delusion. She realized that being young and pretty was not going to save her. She realized that the Instagram live she had posted was going to be played in court. "No, no, no," Kayla screamed as the cuffs locked. "I cannot go to jail. I have a skincare routine. I have allergies. Please let me call my mom." The officers marched her off the stage. As she was led past the crowd, the silence was broken by the sound of flashbulbs. The press had arrived. Kayla Jenkins, the girl who wanted to be famous, was finally getting her wish. Her tear-streaked face, ruined dress, and handcuffed wrists were being immortalized by every photographer in Chicago. I watched it all from my perch on the stairs. I felt a strange sense of detachment. There was no joy, only a profound sense of balance being restored. Gravity had finally done its work. The weight of their lies had pulled them down, and I was the only one left standing, because I was the only one who had been standing on solid ground all along. A waiter, looking shell-shocked by the events, passed by the stairs holding a tray of untouched red wine. "Excuse me?" I said softly. The waiter stopped, looking up at me with wide eyes. "Yes, doctor." I reached out and took a glass. The crystal was cool against my fingers. The wine was a deep, rich crimson, the color of a heart beating. I walked up 2 more steps until I was high enough to see the entire room. I looked at the exit, where the flashing blue lights of the police cars were reflecting off the glass doors. I saw Terrence being shoved into the back of a black SUV. I saw Kayla being guided into a patrol car. I swirled the wine in the glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip. It tasted like victory. It tasted like freedom. Agent Vance walked back into the room, adjusting his tie. He looked up at me and gave a small salute. "It is done, Dr. Brooks," he mouthed. I raised my glass to him. Then I raised it to the empty stage. Then I raised it to the portrait of my father that hung in the back of the room. "The king is dead," I whispered to the empty air. I took another sip, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Long live the Queen. The air in Paris smells different than the air in Chicago. It smells of roasting chestnuts, rain on cobblestones, and most importantly, it smells of peace. I am sitting at a small, round table outside a cafe in the 7th arrondissement, watching the golden light of the afternoon sun hit the iron lattice of the Eiffel Tower. On the table in front of me sits a porcelain cup of espresso and a thick stack of documents bound in leather. I pick up my fountain pen. The weight of it is familiar, but the hand holding it no longer shakes with rage or grief. I sign my name at the bottom of the final page. Dr. Vivian Brooks. With that signature, I have officially closed on the acquisition of a private clinic here in France. St. Jude International is no longer a dream. It is a reality. I am not just expanding my father's legacy. I am reinventing it on my own terms. It has been exactly 365 days since the night of the Phoenix Rising Gala, since the night I burned my old life to the ground. Sometimes when the city is quiet, I wonder about the people who used to inhabit that life. I do not wonder with longing. I wonder with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying a specimen under a microscope. 4,000 miles away in a cramped studio apartment on the south side of Chicago, Sarah is waking up. But she is not waking up in a villa. She is not waking up to the sound of birds chirping in a manicured garden. She is waking up to the sound of her upstairs neighbors arguing and the dripping of a leaky faucet she cannot afford to fix. After the foreclosure, Sarah lost everything. Marcus, the husband she thought would protect her, filed for divorce 3 weeks after the gala. He claimed he didn't know about her debts, throwing her under the bus to save his own credit score. Now Sarah works as a receptionist at a dental office. She spends her days answering phones and being yelled at by patients, a cruel irony for a woman who used to terrorize service workers. She drives a 10-year-old sedan with a rusted bumper. Sometimes I am told she drives past her old house, the one I took back, and just sits there crying in the street. She is a queen without a castle, a socialite without a circle, living in the shadow of the bridges she burned. Then there is Kayla. The girl who wanted to be famous found fame, but not the kind she wanted. The video of her being arrested in the stolen, ruined dress went viral. It was viewed 10 million times. She became a meme. The Karen of St. Jude. No medical school would touch her. No hospital would hire her. Last I heard, she found a job at a fast food diner on the outskirts of the city. I can picture her now. She is wearing a polyester uniform that smells of grease. Her acrylic nails are gone, replaced by short, chipped, unpolished ones because of health code regulations. Just yesterday, a former colleague of mine sent me a video. It was taken by a customer at that diner. In the video, Kayla is trying to explain to an angry customer that the milkshake machine is broken. The customer, a teenage boy, gets annoyed. He laughs and throws his large soda at her. The sticky, dark liquid splashes over her uniform, dripping down her face. "Ew, look at you," the boy laughs. "You are a mess." Kayla stands there dripping wet, humiliated, and for a split second she looks into the camera. And I know she remembers. She remembers the hot coffee she threw on me in the lobby. She remembers the laughter. She remembers the power she thought she had. Now the universe has returned the favor. She is serving the world exactly what she served me, and she is choking on it. And finally, there is Terrence. My husband. The CEO. The visionary. He is currently residing in the Federal Correctional Institution in Pekin, Illinois. He was sentenced to 12 years for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Prison has not been kind to Terrence. The narcissism that served him well in the boardroom made him a target in the cell block. I heard from his lawyer, who called begging for a character reference I refused to give, that Terrence got into an altercation over a card game last month. He called another inmate a loser. That inmate beat him until his jaw was fractured. Terrence lost 2 of his front teeth, the perfect veneers-capped teeth he used to flash at cameras. Now when he smiles, he looks like a broken piano. He spends his days in the library writing letters to appeals courts that are never read, telling anyone who will listen that he used to be a king. But in there, he is just a number. Inmate 8940. My phone buzzes on the cafe table, pulling me back to the Paris afternoon. I look at the screen. The area code is from Illinois. The caller ID says Federal Department of Corrections, collect call. It is him. It is the anniversary of his arrest. He is calling me. Maybe to beg. Maybe to scream. Maybe just to hear the voice of the woman whose life he tried to destroy, just to feel some connection to the power he lost. I look at the name flashing on the screen. For a moment I feel a phantom weight in my chest. The weight of 10 years of marriage. The weight of the lies. The weight of the gaslighting. But then I look up. A young waiter is placing a fresh croissant on my table. He smiles at me, kind and respectful. "Bonjour, madame," he says. Is there anything else you need? I look back at the phone. The ringing is persistent. No, I say to the waiter, smiling back. I have everything I need. I reach out with a steady hand. I do not swipe to answer. I press the side button to silence the ring. Then I tap the info icon. I scroll down to the bottom of the contact card. Block this caller. I tap it. A confirmation box pops up. Block contact. I tap yes. The phone goes silent. The screen goes black. It is done. The final thread is cut. He is screaming into a void and I am no longer listening. I pick up my coffee and take a sip. It is rich and bitter and perfect. I gather my papers and stand up. I smooth down the front of my white linen blazer. I leave a generous tip on the table, more than is necessary, simply because I can. I walk out of the cafe and onto the bustling street. The sun is warm on my face. The wind tangles my hair, but I do not fix it. I let it be wild. I let it be free. I walk toward the Seine River, my heels clicking a rhythm of victory on the pavement. I am Dr. Vivienne Brooks. I am a survivor. I am a CEO. And as I merge into the crowd of people living their lives, I realize that the phoenix did not just rise from the ashes. She learned how to fly. If you have ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, let me know in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that sometimes the best revenge is simply being happy, successful, and completely unreachable. Thank you for listening to my story. I am going to go enjoy my life now. Au revoir.